Greetings, Exile. I'm Brittleknee. I'm a somewhat new Path of Exile player and a brand new streamer. This is also my very first build guide. The link for the written version on the PoE forums can be found below. I'm going to go ahead and put the disclaimer front and center that this build is largely based off of Hui's SRS Necromancer. After playing the build for a few leagues and helping Hui update his guide, I wanted to take what I've learned through trial and error and construct my own updated guide for 3.3 Incursion. The build has undergone some changes through the last two major patches, but most of them have been beneficial and it remains viable as an all-in-one character for all content. I'm going to break this guide down into a few core parts. We'll first go over the strengths and weaknesses of the build to see if it's something that might be for you. We'll also touch on how the build works and why it's particularly strong. Lastly, we'll go over the Ascendancy and what the major keystone passives are. Then we'll talk about the gear that's required to begin in-game content. After that, we'll talk about the gearing process and top it off with some leveling tips and tricks. If you want to skip to any of these sections to watch right away, go ahead and click on that section now. This build is a summoner/minion build. It utilizes the skill gem Summon Raging Spirits, or SRS. These are temporary minions you summon to existence which can deal significant damage through melee strikes. These little guys, however, have their own free will and unlike zombies, specters, and skeletons, will not follow you directly and cannot be recalled by convocation. So, why should you consider this build? Let's start with the pros and cons. This build can do all content. That's right, every bit of it. Bosses, mapping, lab farming, magic find, you name it, and there's a way for this build to do it. Overall, it's a great bosser. It's cleared all boss content including Red Elder, Shaper, Siri, and even Uber Elder. With a top end of around 6.8 million Shaper damage, boss deletion is probably what this build does best. The build's also a great mapper. There's no dead mods to speak of. You can run anything without worry. Reflect, no regen, no problem. You can also put together a respectable amount of magic find without having to level a second character. At around 60% increased item quantity and around 6k HP, you aren't restricted to what you want to shape and farm. Farming tier 15s or even your Elder map will be no problem. With time and patience, it's also a great league starter. Some of the items are costly to obtain, but there's always good alternatives and crafting you can do in the meantime while farming. Now let's talk about the hangups this build faces. Top on the list is mana management. With anywhere between 3 and 6 auras, there's not a lot of mana left over to cast from. I've proposed 3 solutions to the overall mana problem, which we'll go over in more detail later in the gearing section. The build is affected by damage halts. What I mean by this is that any boss with powerful AoE can wipe out your SRS with a single ability and thus halt all of your damage. This is very detrimental to phase fights such as at Siri, as the extra large flame blast can kill all of your minions, leaving you basically naked for the 4-way split. You can try and get enough SRS back out, but you might not be able to lock her down in time to phase her instantly, since you won't be at your full damage potential. And, speaking of summoning, it does take time to get up to 20 SRS even with a decent amount of cast speed due to the nerf in Mistress of Sacrifice. If fights require high movement, it can be difficult to summon enough SRS in between dodging incoming damage. So what makes this build so powerful? As a minion build, we can only scale our minions' damage through minion affixes. Unlike spellcasters and melee builds, local modifiers to damage, attack speed, and cast speed only apply to us, the summoner, and not our minions. And I'm gonna put another disclaimer out there that I suck at math, so this won't be a 100% accurate breakdown of all the damage modifiers this build uses. Rather, it's more of a generalized look because I can somewhat manage the complicated calculations of basic addition. This won't take into account for SRS's 6th link, and the keystones which provide 2 large damage boosts will be talked about separately after this bit. Now let's start with the Ascendancy. The Necromancer rework was a big one, but overall it turned out really nice. You'll want to pick up Commander of Darkness, Mistress of Sacrifice, Puppet Master, and Evoker. Altogether, they're responsible for the following minion buffs. About 125% minion damage, 30% minion life, 2% minion regen, 20% of all resist to minions, 21% attack and cast speed, and 20% movement. They also add 60% duration to the SRS themselves. Now let's look at the passive tree. I'm not going to go over every node, so I'll just include the totals like before. You pick up about 46% minion life, 1.5% minion life regen, 80% minion damage, 16% all res for minions, and about 12% attack and cast speed. And last, we'll look at a few modifiers that come from gear. Now, the Abyss Jewels are very powerful. They provide an affix that is 20% minion damage on minion skill. And the final tree has 8 available slots. So that's 8 times 20, which is 160%, just from jewels alone. The Scourge also provides 15% attack speed as well as 70% damage as long as you've hit recently. And lastly, there's our Helm enchant from Labyrinth. It provides 21% additional attack speed for a total of 51%. So what does that damage look like altogether? Well, it's about 435% minion damage, 76% minion life, 36 all res for minions, as well as 3.5% regen, a total of 84% attack and cast speed, 20% movement, and 60% duration. Now again, these are just raw numbers. We're not looking at any of the additive physical damage, any of SRS's 6 links, and are not even factoring in the conversion through hatred and the mini hatred located on the gloves. So, it's a lot of damage and it adds up really quickly, so it's easy to see why this build is so powerful. Now we'll focus on the Keystone passives. The 2 Keystone passives utilized in this build are also a huge source of damage. Both Elemental Equilibrium and Necromantic Aegis are crucial, and we'll talk about why. We'll start with Elemental Equilibrium, often referred to as EE. This keystone is probably the largest overall damage multiplier we get because it powerfully scales all of the elemental damage our SRS do, which is quite a bit when we factor in all supports, auras, and conversions. It's also one of the only ways we can specifically target with our SRS as well, which I'll show you in a moment. The thing to remember is that EE occurs only when you, the summoner, hit. Your minions cannot apply it in any way, and we trigger it with lightning damage in 2 different ways. It lasts 5 seconds at a time and should be refreshed for 100% uptime. You will know when EE is applied with a visual effect at the bottom of the mob's hitbox, which is a pinkish bluish swirl. You'll also see a written confirmation that EE is both active and attuned to the correct element when you see Resist Lightning, Vulnerable to Fire, and Vulnerable to Cold. With Trash, this may be hard to see because of how quickly it dies, but you should definitely see this written confirmation on mouse over targeting when fighting bosses. The first way we apply EE is through Orb of Storms, which you get as a quest reward while leveling. Orb of Storms is a cast at player AoE lightning spell which continually zaps enemies within range for its duration. It is great for boss fights as it can be dropped off like a fart in an empty grocery store aisle to apply EE when you're avoiding mechanics. It also allows you to sort of zero in on one particular target in fights like Atziri and Uber Elder. The SRS AI can be quite ADD at times, and even though when you summon them right next to a particular enemy, they will attack whatever they want to. By dropping Orb of Storms under a particular boss, what minions do attack it will be doing their full damage, and this is as close to single target as this build can get when there are multiple enemies present. The second way we apply EE is through Shield Charge, which takes advantage of the adds lightning damage to attacks affix, which can be found on jewelry and gloves. It can also be enchanted by Elrion in an open prefix slot when he reaches level 6. Since Shield Charge also deals AoE damage, you can apply the debuff to multiple mobs at once. It should be noted that you can apply EE with Foul Lightning Trap, but it only applies when it is triggered and will not refresh the debuff even if the mobs continue to stand in its effect. Now let's move on to the second Keystone passive, which is Necromantic Aegis, and it is quite powerful. The simple explanation is that you're giving your shield to your minions. That includes all modifiers, including implicit modifiers such as armor and chance to blocks. Taking this keystone does give up a lot of toughness, but it's for a really good cause. Lyco is a staple for quite a few builds as it has a very powerful explicit modifier, which is hits cannot be evaded. For melee builds, this is a simple way to scoot the accuracy requirement and essentially does the same for SRS. There are plenty out there that would say that SRS don't need accuracy, but if you take the time and path of building, you'll see that Lyco provides more DPS than even Victoria's Charity. Now, I don't know for sure if this is how it's always been, but certainly with the addition of Abyss Jewels to the game and all of the damage scaling that they provide, whiffing is just not happy making. By equipping Lyco, it's at about 11.2% damage upgrade over Victoria's Charity with the gear I was using last league. However, toggling the keystone off and on is a staggering 100k DPS loss per SRS, which is 2 million damage overall. Now that we've looked at gear, passive trees, ascendancy, and the major keystones, hopefully it paints a picture of why this build is so good. So now let's talk about gear. The gear section on the written guide is extensive and I put a lot of time into it, so please check it out. I won't be going over everything written there in this video, but rather I'll provide more of an overview. There are 3 ways to gear this build, which centers around 3 different body armors. Each body armor solves the mana problem in its own unique way, so it's up to you to decide what works best, or what sounds the most fun. The first is Belly of the Beast. This is the core, tried and true base body armor for this build. It was what was originally recommended, and it offers both great survivability and powerful healing bonuses. Any way you look at it, for most players, I feel like Belly of the Beast is the best choice. The synergy between the passives, Blood of the Karui, Belly's healing explicit, and the Pantheon is just too amazing to pass up. Since this build has no leech and no life regen outside of Stone Golem, I feel it's really important to get the most out of your life flasks. You'll also have the largest life pool using the Belly versus other armors, as it has a 40% maximum life multiplier, which scales powerfully with flat life on Abyss Jewels and life on gear. It does, however, suffer from mana problems, as continually casting against a mostly reserved mana pool can feel pretty bad. There's 2 ways to solve it. One is to stack enough mana regen on your rings and amulet and maybe take a passive or 2 so that you can regen your mana as fast as you cast your SRS. The other way is to just simply use a mana potion. The second body armor you can use is the Covenant. Not a lot changes overall between this armor and the Belly as far as gear and the passive tree is concerned. The Covenant can also be considered a budget-friendly option, as this armor isn't as sought after as the Belly, and, depending on the current meta, could be considerably less even 6-linked. If a +1 corrupted armor is out of your budget, then the extra damage you get through the extra chaos explicit could be very appealing. This also allows for a bit more gem freedom, since you won't need Val Clarity outside of a no-regen map. Since you're casting your SRS from life versus mana, and our best friend ever, Stone Golem, has your back and easily regenerates the life you spend casting, it's a very comfortable build. You can run one more smaller aura as a result, such as Purity of Elements, to really help round out your resists. The downside is you're trading these conveniences for total life and one could argue survivability. The maximum life multiplier on the Covenant is only 10% versus 40% on the Belly. And you're also losing out on that life flask healing bonus, which means you can't heal as effectively. If the added damage and the convenience of casting from life is worth that loss to you, then this might be the build for you. Now the third body armor I'm not really going to get into. It's theory crafted only at this point, so while it is included in the guide without warning, I don't want to waste your time in this video talking about something that I haven't played. Quick overview is that it's a low life SRS build based off of Chevron's wrappings. Now the rest of the gear you'll need for each type of body armor can be found on the forum post or in the respective path of building link below. So let's get to the point that everybody wants to hear about. What do you need to begin in-game content? Well, you'll definitely want a 5-link with at least 20 gems and around 6k life. And you'll definitely want to have knocked Uber Labs out as well. The Guardian fights will be difficult on a 5-link, but doable. A 6-link is definitely recommended for Shaper and Uber at Siri and beyond. A +1 is needed for Uber Elder, and I could barely do it with a +2 Skin of the Loyal. Not that I'm the best player and needed it, I needed it because I'm not the best player, and I'm fine with admitting that. You can get into red maps and do Red Elder on a 5-link provided you have sufficient HP to take some larger hits and can use your potions through his final phase. Lycosidé and Grip of the Council are a must and must be prioritized. Lyco prices usually follow currency inflation trends in the league, while the cost of grips will steadily decrease over time, so plan your purchases accordingly. Jewels that have minion damage on minion skill are also a must, but if the fizz damage ones are too expensive, you can choose fire or cold instead. Lastly, get your helm enchantment. It's also a must. Some of the high resistances and life ones can be quite pricey, so don't be afraid to buy a blank one and try crafting yourself. The rest of the gem links, jewels, and flasks can be found on the written guide as well, in addition to gear swaps such as the ones needed for Magic Find, Hall of the Grandmasters, and Uber Elder. Now we can talk about leveling. Minion leveling is generally some of the easiest and most laid-back leveling in the game. Nothing like letting everyone else do the work for you, right? Well, there's 3 ways to level the build. One is however you want. Leveling honestly sucks. I come from the land of Diablo 3 where there's this magical thing called power leveling, and while playing through PoE's campaign the first time was pretty magical, by now it makes me want to self-cast Culling Strike. So whatever makes this chore bearable for you, level that way. The second way is a pretty neat little helmet called the Red Covenant. It is quite perfect for leveling. It makes your SRS beefy at the cost of only being able to cast 5 of them, but this is actually a buff. At League Start, when there's no Elrion jewelry to be found, only having to manage 5 of the little guys can be quite the relief. The 4 link in the helmet when combined with zombies will easily get you into early mapping. However, the SRS gems do not need to be socketed into the helmet to gain the effect. If you get a tabula, you can still 6-link your SRS there. Leveling this away allows you to learn the SRS playstyle as you go and can be a lot of fun. If you use this helmet, don't forget to pick up Arumvarax, the sword, to help you with your resist since you can't wear Goldrim. The third way to level is the old Poet's Pins, if it's later in the league or you simply have the dough. It face rolls the entire leveling process, being strong enough that you don't even need to allocate passives for it, which means no respecking at a certain level. Just hold down the barrage or frenzy button, close your eyes, and boom! Suddenly Act 10 Kitava is dead. It is seriously that stupid fast. And if you hate leveling as much as I do, faster is better. Well, you made it through the video, thanks for watching, and I hope this has been both informative and helpful. As always, don't forget to subscribe for new content, and follow me on Twitch to see this and other builds in action. Good luck, and stay safe out there, Exile.